Welcome back, Troll Feeders. I'm Nora, and here's a few things that you probably didn't think of. And today I am talking about The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Disney, and how it portrays the 7 deadly sins in the movie itself. Pretty much when I say that The Hunchback of Notre Dame has the 7 deadly sins in it, I mean it quite literally. Pretty much there's 5 main characters in the movie. 4 of them are there almost right from the beginning. But then there's a secret character that's only really thought about at the end. But anyways, like I was saying, each character represents at least 1 or 2 of the 7 deadly sins, and they actually have characteristics that match it, that backs up the whole theory of that. So yeah, let me start with Quasimodo. Quasimodo is basically the protagonist of the entire movie. First thing that you really notice about Quasimodo is that, he's stayed in a bell tower for 20 years since he was a baby, so he's around 19 to 20, give or take. We're not really sure how old he is when he's a baby. But anyways, the point is that the first features that we really see of Quasimodo is that he lives in the bell tower. He never leaves. What does that tell you? Well, first of all, one of the 7 deadly sins is called sloth. Sloth means basically laziness, and essentially Quasimodo, up until the movie, which is 20 years after he was born, he had no motivation to actually try to leave. For 20 frickin' years, no motivation at all to leave the bell tower. So that right there is the perfect example of sloth. Now the other sin, the other 7 deadly sin that Quasimodo represents is also gluttony. Now, it's not 100% out there in your face really when it comes to like it is with the first sin, the first sin, sloth, and all that. Sloth is actually kind of obvious when you think about it, but gluttony, it's not really obvious when you actually think about it with Quasimodo representing sloth and gluttony. The reason why he represents sloth and gluttony is because when he actually went to the festival, the Festival of Fools, he was skittish, he was kind of scared and intimidated at first, but then, towards the end, before everything went south, he was having fun, he was having a good time, and all that. He was being rather gluttonous, you could say. But, hey, that's my opinion. Either way, you can still fit it in there no matter what. So, anyways, I only got 30 minutes to work on this, so I'm going to try to get through all the characters with their meanings as quickly as possible. I'm going to try to dedicate maybe from a few minutes to 5 minutes for each character. But, yeah. And Quasimodo was actually a pretty easy one to explain, and anyways, it's pretty easy to explain and all that, so I don't really feel like I need to go into further details of why Quasimodo represents 2 of the 7 deadly sins, sloth and gluttony. Okay, let's move on to the next character. Okay, so next character is Phoebus. I was gonna do Esmeralda, but technically in the movie Phoebus shows up before Esmeralda, but you don't really know his name until sometime after Esmeralda is actually introduced. Nonetheless, Phoebus. Now, this character is actually really interesting because, besides him being the captain of the captain of the guards and all that, besides that, you don't really know that much about him. And one of the things that is actually demonstrated the most, right off the bat actually, is the fact that he represents the 7 deadly sin of pride. And in case you're wondering, how exactly does Phoebus represent pride? He doesn't seem like that kind of guy and all that. Well, technically you could be right, but at the same time, he actually demonstrates multiple times that he is very prideful in his job. Like, he really takes his job seriously, and his job is to protect the citizens. In fact, he even goes as far as to defy Frollo just to protect innocent people, because that is his job. That's what he takes pride in. And all that. So and sure, he even sure, he's interested in Esmeralda and all that, but he does get her at the end. Of course, it's a movie that's like 20 years old by now. Actually, the movie came out in I think it said 1996, which I was a 5-year-old when that movie came out. So yeah, so there's that. And damn, I was hoping this would go a bit longer. I gotta talk more about the characters' backgrounds, but yeah. Anyways, pretty much like right when he's introduced, the character as Phoebus, he ends up defending Esmeralda while she's dancing and all that. Now, if you've seen the movie, you pretty much know that, but he doesn't exactly reveal who he actually is until the guards turn their swords on him, and then he opens his cloak and reveals that he's actually the captain who has just recently transferred there. And at that point, the guards shit themselves. Well, they don't literally shit themselves, but they probably would have if they could have. But anyways, the point is, as soon as he opens his cloak and reveals who he is, he demonstrates that he's very prideful. In fact, when he first meets Frollo, he actually stands at attention with pride and all that. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to fully demonstrate how he represents pride. But if you think about his actions versus what he was commanded and all that, it becomes a lot more obvious. So yeah, anyways, next character, let's go for it. Okay, finally on to Esmeralda. Now, Esmeralda is, funny thing, she gets introduced right around when Phoebus does, technically, because technically they actually don't say her name, you just see her dancing. Now, the interesting part is that some people, mostly my brother, would think that since Esmeralda is a woman, that she would automatically represent lust. Turns out she does represent two of the sins, but she does not represent lust. She actually represents greed and envy. Now, pretty much how she represents greed is actually pretty simply demonstrated upon when she's introduced. When she's first introduced, even though you don't know her name at the time, it's during the scene with Phoebus. But anyways, she's dancing for money. And now, technically, she herself is not a greedy person per se. She's actually just trying to get money to help her friends and her family and all that. But at the same time, greed is what drives people to make a living for themselves to begin with. So that's pretty much why Esmeralda is the embodiment of greed. She's not greedy for herself. She's trying to accumulate wealth to help her family and friends. Anyways, now, as for why she represents envy as well, that's an interesting thing. It's actually a bit more symbolic in her appearance and her actions, not just motivations like, dancing for money so that she can get money for her family and friends. Besides that, if you actually take a careful look, you see that Esmeralda has green eyes. Now, you could say, that's just her eye color, no big deal. Well, true, but isn't envy also referred to as the green-eyed monster? Not saying that Esmeralda is a monster, I just thought it was an interesting observation, and it goes so well with the theory of envy. But no, technically the true demonstration of envy is actually done between the interactions of the other characters when it comes to Esmeralda. Now, basically during the Feast of Fools, Esmeralda starts like dancing, and then you find out who she is and all that. And one of the things she does is she goes up to Frollo and puts a sash around his neck and all that while dancing very, very enticingly, for lack of better words. Anyways, so yeah, now I guarantee you that based on her actual looks alone, if this was a real life woman, she'd be downright gorgeous, by the way. So yeah, anyways, I guarantee you that as soon as she went up to Frollo, all the guys in the odds were instantly envious of Frollo just because of how beautiful Esmeralda is. Not only that, but for quite a while throughout the movie, Quasimodo and Phoebus actually lock heads with each other because of Esmeralda. They both want her attention, striking envy when she gives one the attention and not the other. So, that's pretty much how Esmeralda represents the sin of both greed and envy. Now, if that makes you see her in a different light, well, too bad, because that's basically what she is now. She is a symbol. She is the embodiment of greed and envy. So, yeah. Anyways, next character up. And this one is going to be surprising for you guys. Okay, so, yeah, here's something that's going to be shocking. Shocking. Now, when me and my brother saw The Hunchback of Notre Dame when we were kids, basically, well, actually not basically. First of all, I didn't even notice this originally, and it wasn't until more recently when I started thinking about it. And anyways, when I first told my brother about my theory about how the 7 deadly sins are represented in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, my brother started thinking, well, maybe Frollo is pride. And I actually have to squash that now, because basically Frollo is not pride. Well, I already said that Phoebus was pride, but anyways, Frollo is lust, and there's actually quite a few examples of him demonstrating lust. Like, an example of first of all, lust doesn't always mean sexual attraction. Like, sure, that's where it's mostly demonstrated in, but it doesn't always mean that. Like, it can mean pursuing or pursuit, and which Phoebus does do that. He does pursue the gypsies throughout the entire movie. But when he sees Esmeralda at the Festival of Fools, he realizes that she's very beautiful and starts lusting after her, literally. And it's literally like when Esmeralda is dancing in the Festival of Fools, like Frollo has this like creepster expression, like I want some of that booty. And I'm not even joking on that. I will have that displayed. But anyways, the point is like ever since then, Frollo pretty much has demonstrated on multiple occasions that he is sexually attracted to Esmeralda and is basically pursuing her. Anyways, and so yeah. Anyways, like I said, there's that whole creeper expression that they had anyways, and then but the more obvious part. And the more obvious demonstration of his lust for her is when Esmeralda goes into Notre Dame to seek sanctuary, and Frollo shows up. And before Frollo actually leaves, he actually grabs Esmeralda, and as he grabs Esmeralda, and he says, like I said, he says what he's going to do to her and all that. Well, technically it was an excuse. Anyways, the point is he actually smells her hair, and who else smells the hair of a woman? Well, someone who's lusting after her. And yeah, so anyways, now technically when she asks him what's he doing, he kind of just brushes off and says that he was just imagining a noose around her neck. So then, anyways, but another great example of him representing lust is the fact that there's a whole 2-minute scene of Frollo talking. Well, he's technically singing, but anyways, he's basically expressing that he's lusting after Esmeralda. But at the same time, because he doesn't see anything evil within himself, he basically says that, anyways, that's like witchcraft and stuff. But towards the end of that whole scene, he accepts that he's lusting after her, and that if she doesn't choose him as a lover, then he is going to ensure that she burns at the stake, which almost happens, in fact. But Quasimodo stops him. So yeah. Anyways, there's that. But yeah, I guess we're going on to the secret character now, because I've done Quasimodo, Phoebus, Esmeralda, and now Frollo. And I did say there was a fifth secret character that no one really thinks about in the entire movie, which is actually really sad, given this movie's been out for like 20 years and all that, and it's still, and no one has noticed at all. Well, it's not like they have noticed. They haven't noticed the representation of it, of what this character represents. So yeah, we're moving on. Okay, so right now a slight recap of as we've done Quasimodo, who is sloth and gluttony, as we've done Phoebus, who's pride, Esmeralda, who's envy and greed, Frollo, who is lust. And now onto the fifth and secret character, who represents let's face it, we're all looking forward to this one, is Wrath. Who is Wrath? When has Wrath been actually introduced into the actual movie? Well, I can tell you, it's been there from the very beginning of the actual movie. Now, you don't really think about it until you get to the end of the movie, but Notre Dame itself is the embodiment of Wrath. Now, you can try to basically say, wait, Notre Dame's not a character, and technically you're right. Notre Dame is not a character. It is a location and setting for the entire movie. But it is also technically the only thing in the movie that has ever demonstrated wrath. Now, granted, my brother would probably argue that Frollo's pride and wrath because Frollo hates the gypsies. But no, technically he hates the gypsies, but that's not the same thing as wrath. Hatred is just when you just don't like somebody in general, while wrath occurs after you have angered somebody on a personal level. At least that's always been my experience with it. So yeah, anyways, and what exactly has someone done on, in this case, Frollo, because Frollo is the antagonist and he dies because he falls off of a gargoyle. And it's at Notre Dame, but right before he falls, the gargoyle actually kind of morphs into a much more sinister look with glowing red eyes and all that, and he looks at it in fear. Frollo looks at it in fear. So that was the full demonstration of wrath, and unfortunately, Notre Dame itself has only been actually. The audience's eyes have only been drawn to Notre Dame itself twice in the entire movie. So there's a very few amount of examples to prove that Notre Dame is wrath, other than the end where Frollo dies, and in the beginning of the movie when Frollo is basically being confronted by the archdeacon. Now, you could say that the archdeacon technically was Frollo, and it did say in the summary that Frollo was an archdeacon. Technically, he was just a clerk. In the movie, they never actually say that Frollo was an archdeacon. They refer to him as being a clerk. The one person who is referred to as an archdeacon is the guy who is basically the guy in charge of Notre Dame. And yes, he's referred to as the archdeacon, and how he convinced Frollo to basically spare Quasimodo when Quasimodo was a baby in the beginning of the movie. But the actual thing that actually fully convinced him was the fact that when he looked, when it was pointed out to him, the many eyes of Notre Dame were watching him. He looks at all the statues and they're all glaring at him. All the statues on Notre Dame are glaring at him like, Frollo, I am your worst nightmare. I am coming for you. Which, obviously, that's what happened at the end. But still, anyways, the point is the point I'm trying to make is that all the times that our attention was brought to Notre Dame itself, it was always in a very anger and wrathful manner. And yeah, that right there is the demonstration of the deadly sin of wrath. Man, I wish I had more to go on besides that, because that was actually my favorite part in the movies. Actually, my two favorite parts of the movies in the movie actually was the both demonstrations of wrath. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, that's about it. There's not really much else to say about that, and this is almost going on 5 minutes. So yeah. So there you have it. Hopefully this didn't ruin your childhood if you saw it as a kid. And well. Once again, I'm Nora, and this was just a few things that you probably didn't think of. Sorry for the terrible intro and outro.